George had not touched his tools for 43 days. They waited in the small wooden building behind his house, covered in dust and silence. The saw his father once gave him lay on a shelf beside cutting tools he bought when he still believed he would create something important. Every morning, George walked past that building on his way to the office job he never wanted. Each day he promised himself, "Tonight, I will begin." But every night arrived with excuses, tiredness, stress, or fear. Slowly, days became weeks, and his tools remained unused. George was 32 years old. He had a steady office job, a small house, and a quiet life. He had no wife and no children, and nothing serious to complain about. Yet something inside him felt unfinished. He had never built anything with his own hands. There were no projects, no proof that he could create something real. His father had been a true carpenter. He built their family home piece by piece after long workdays and weekends. George remembered watching him as a child, learning patience from every careful movement. When George was young, he used to sit near his father's workbench and observe every step. His father would smooth the same table leg for nearly an hour. He measured again and again before cutting the wood. George once asked why he worked so slowly. His father smiled and said, "Because wood does not forgive mistakes." Those words stayed in George's mind. Now, years later, he remembered them every time he walked past the small building and chose not to enter. The tools reminded him of a dream he had left behind. One Saturday morning, George noticed his neighbor William working outside his house. William was around 60 years old and had stopped working full-time years ago. He was building a wooden bench in his yard. George watched from his kitchen window. William worked carefully for 20 minutes. Then he stopped, cleaned his tools, covered the bench with cloth, and went inside. The next morning, William returned and worked for another 20 minutes. George found this strange. Why would someone build something so slowly when there was so much daylight left? One morning, George walked outside with his coffee and spoke to William. "You are building that bench very slowly," he said. William smiled and replied, "I have time, but not much strength now. So I work for 20 minutes. That is all I can give." George asked, "When will you finish?" William answered calmly, "Does it matter? It will be done when it is done. But every morning, I have something to return to." Those words stayed with George for the rest of the day. That night, George opened the door to the small building for the first time in weeks. The smell of wood, oil, and dust filled the air. Old memories came back to him. Against the wall stood an unfinished bookshelf he had started 2 years earlier. He picked up a piece of sandpaper and rubbed one corner of a shelf. It lasted only 5 minutes, maybe less. Then he put the sandpaper down and closed the door. He did not feel proud or excited, but he felt something different. He had begun again. The next evening, George returned and rubbed another corner smooth. He did not watch the clock. He did not make a big plan. He simply opened the door, worked a little, and stopped. Some nights he worked for 3 minutes. Other nights, 10. One evening he was too tired. He stood at the door, looked inside, and closed it without touching anything. The next night, he came back again. There was no pressure, no rush, only the small habit of returning to his tools. After 2 weeks, half of the bookshelf was smooth. George felt surprised by how much had changed with so little effort each day. Then his boss gave him new work with long hours and hard deadlines. George came home very tired every night. He looked at the small building and told himself he would return when work became easier. 1 week passed. Then another. The door stayed closed. The tools waited again. Old habits tried to return, and his dream once more slipped into silence. One evening, George saw William outside again, still working on the same bench, still for 20 minutes. George walked over and said, "You are still working on it." William replied, "I missed some days last week. I was sick, but I came back." George asked, "Does it bother you to keep starting and stopping?" William shook his head and said, "Starting and stopping is just life. The only real problem is never coming back." Those words struck George deeply and stayed in his mind that night. That same night, George opened the small building again. He did not count how many days had passed. He picked up the sandpaper and worked on one edge for 3 minutes. Then he left. The next night, he returned. And the night after that. Slowly, the bookshelf grew closer to completion. Some nights he smoothed wood. Some nights he measured pieces. Some nights he only stood there holding a board in his hands. Each small action became a quiet promise to himself. Autumn arrived, and the air became cooler. One Thursday evening, George placed the last shelf into position. The bookshelf stood in his living room at last. It was not perfect. The color was uneven in places. One corner was not straight. But it was finished. He did not build it in one weekend. He did not build it with excitement or great energy. He built it the way William built his bench and the way his father built their house, slowly, patiently, and by returning again and again. George placed his father's old book about carpentry on the top shelf. He stepped back and looked at his work. He did not feel like a winner. He did not feel completely changed. He simply felt calm and steady. The bookshelf was not just wood and nails. It was proof that small efforts could grow into something real. For the first time in years, George felt that his hands had created something meaningful, even if it was imperfect. That night, George opened his notebook and drew a simple table. It had 4 legs and a flat top. Nothing fancy. No big design. Just something simple and possible. He told himself he would start it tomorrow. Maybe for 5 minutes. Maybe for 10. It did not matter. He no longer feared slow progress. He understood that coming back was more important than finishing fast. His life no longer needed big changes, only small daily steps. George learned that dreams do not die from failure. They die from silence and waiting. Every day he avoided the small building, he lost a piece of himself. Every day he returned, even for 3 minutes, he gained something back. His neighbor William and his father had taught him the same lesson without knowing it. Work does not need strength alone. It needs patience. It needs the courage to begin again after stopping. This truth slowly shaped George's new way of living. Soon, George noticed something else changing. His office job still felt heavy, but his evenings felt lighter. He had something to look forward to after work. He was no longer only an employee. He was a builder again, even if only for minutes a day. His hands became steady. His mind became quieter. He stopped thinking about the days he missed and focused on the days he returned. The small building behind his house was no longer a place of regret. It became a place of peace. People often believe they need motivation to begin. George learned that beginning brings motivation. His bookshelf did not appear because of excitement. It appeared because of return. Night after night, small actions grew into something visible. He did not change suddenly. He changed slowly. And that change stayed. Each piece of wood reminded him that progress is not loud. It is quiet and patient. It does not shout. It waits for you to come back. George understood that life itself works the same way. We start and stop many times. We grow tired. We fall behind. But the only true failure is never opening the door again. Whether it is building furniture, learning a skill, or chasing a dream, the rule is the same. Do a little. Then come back. Do not wait for perfect energy or perfect time. Use what you have, even if it is only 5 minutes. The next morning, George smiled as he passed the small building. He did not promise himself big plans. He promised only one thing, to return. Maybe for 5 minutes. Maybe for 10. That was enough. His life had not changed in one moment, but it had found a new direction. George knew now that success was not about speed or perfection. It was about coming back again and again, even when he did not want to. And this time, he would not stop.